The morning light shone through the tall windows of the Esperanza restaurant, glinting on the polished glasses. Amara Marai stood at the entrance to the kitchen, clutching a folder of reports. Her slender fingers, adorned with a single wedding band, twitched slightly with barely contained irritation. "Manuel, that's the third complaint this week." Her voice, usually soft and calm, was ringing with tension. The chef, a man in his mid-teens with graying on his temples, stared sullenly at the floor with his arms crossed over his chest. "Senora Moraes, my dishes are impeccable. If the customers don't like something, perhaps they should look for another establishment," he said stubbornly. Amara took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. The restaurant was her life, her brainchild that she had built from scratch despite coming from a wealthy family. Every detail of the interior, every item on the menu had been carefully thought out by her personally. "Manuel, you are a fine cook, but your arrogance could ruin the restaurant's reputation. I demand that you listen to the guests' wishes." The chef jerked his shoulder, expressing disagreement with his entire appearance. At that moment, one of the waitresses ran into the kitchen. "Senora Moraes, the fresh seafood has arrived. We need to check the quality." Amara nodded and, casting one last stern look at Manuel, headed for the service entrance. The day was just beginning, and there was plenty to do ahead. She personally checked every delivery, supervised the service, and chatted with regular customers. After lunch, when the flow of visitors had died down a bit, Amara sat in her small office reviewing invoices. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight bun, her face without a trace of makeup. She never sought to impress with her appearance, relying on professionalism and business acumen. A light knock on the door made her raise her head. The receptionist announced the arrival of potential investors. Amara adjusted her pearl earrings, her only piece of jewelry besides her wedding ring, and stepped out into the hall. 3 men in expensive suits were seated at a table. One of them was particularly attractive, tall, with correct facial features and an attentive look in his brown eyes. He introduced himself as Tiago Barreto, owner of a chain of restaurants in Sao Paulo. "Senora Moraes, we have heard about your establishment," he began, and his deep voice seemed surprisingly accommodating to Amara. "Your cuisine is renowned far beyond the neighborhood." Throughout the conversation, she realized that she hadn't met such sincere and interested people in a long time. Thiago spoke knowledgeably about the restaurant business. His ideas were fresh and interesting. When they talked about a possible partnership in a new project, Amara felt a slight excitement. The possibility of expanding the business had been beckoning her for a long time. That evening, back home at her and Rodrigo's mansion in an upscale neighborhood, Amara felt unusually excited. She wanted to share the news with her husband, but he was immersed in his laptop, only nodding absent-mindedly in response to her words. "Honey, are you listening to me?" she asked, taking a seat next to her on the couch. "Of course," Rodrigo responded, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Something about a new restaurant?" Amara felt a prick of disappointment. Once upon a time they could talk for hours discussing their plans and dreams. Rodrigo had always supported her desire to develop her own business, even though he himself ran the large construction company he'd inherited from his father. Yes, an opportunity came up to open a second restaurant in the business center. She tried to catch his eye. "What do you think about it?" Rodrigo finally closed his laptop and looked at his wife. Something resembling irritation flashed in his eyes, but he quickly hid the expression behind his usual half-smile. "If you think you can handle it, go ahead." He rose from the couch. "Sorry, I need to make some calls." Amara was alone in the spacious living room. Outside the window, dusk was thickening, turning the outline of the garden into blurred shadows. She thought about how Rodrigo had changed over the past year, becoming distant, staying late at work more often, taking less and less interest in her affairs. In the bedroom, getting ready for bed, Amara looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was still an attractive woman, slender, with a beautiful posture and noble features, but there was a subtle sadness in her eyes that had not been there before. Rodrigo arrived late, smelling of expensive whiskey. He lay silently on his side of the bed, not even saying good night. Amara lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the house and thinking about the upcoming meeting with Tiago Barreto. Tomorrow, they were to discuss the details of cooperation. Sunlight flooded the spacious conference room of the business center where Amara met Tiago to sign the documents. She scrutinized every page of the contract, marking important points with a pencil. Tiago waited patiently, occasionally explaining the details of the financial obligations. "I'm offering an equal partnership." His voice sounded confident and calm. "You bring your experience and reputation. I bring connections and capital. The premises in the business district have already been secured." Amara looked up from the papers. In the morning light, his face seemed especially disposing, open, and honest. She'd spent several sleepless nights thinking about this proposal, weighing the pros and cons. "I'm concerned about the co-management clause." Amara pointed to one of the paragraphs. "How will we make decisions in case of disagreement?" Tiago smiled, pulled out a pen, and made an addition. "Let's spell out a clear division of authority. You have full control of the kitchen and service. I handle administrative matters. We'll make key decisions together." An hour later, all the documents were signed. Amara felt slightly dizzy. She had just made a serious commitment. Tiago, as if sensing her condition, suggested a coffee at a nearby cafe. Over a cup of espresso, the conversation moved smoothly from business to personal. Tiago talked about his first restaurant, about the difficulties he had faced at the beginning of his journey. Amara realized that it had been a long time since she had met someone who was so easy to talk to. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of worries. The premises for the new restaurant needed a major renovation. Amara spent all her free time there, discussing the interior with the designers, planning the arrangement of tables, selecting materials for finishing. Tiago often joined her, bringing fresh eyes and useful ideas. "We could make an open kitchen here," he once suggested, standing in the midst of the construction chaos. "Guests love to watch the cooks at work." Amara imagined what the room would look like after the renovation and nodded in agreement. She liked that Tiago always thought about the comfort of the visitors, not just the profits. At home, she saw Rodrigo less and less often. He returned late and often smelled of women's perfume, but Amara convinced herself it was the scent of female clients or business associates. One morning she noticed a lipstick residue on his shirt, but he attributed it to an accidental collision in the elevator. One night when they were having dinner together, a rare occurrence lately, Rodrigo's phone vibrated insistently. He quickly grabbed it and left the dining room. Amara remained seated at the table, mechanically stirring the cooled soup. Through the wall came the muffled voice of her husband, speaking to someone unusually soft. Working on the new restaurant was an escape from her heavy thoughts. Tiago proved to be an attentive partner. He noticed when she was upset and knew how to find the right words of encouragement. One day, after a particularly difficult day, he brought her her favorite dessert from her own restaurant. "Your pastry chef works wonders," he said as he watched Amara happily taste the brownie. "We need to poach him for a new establishment." They often sat up late into the night discussing menus, staffing, and supply systems. At times like these, Amara forgot about her domestic problems, completely immersed in her work. Tiago never rushed her and listened patiently to all her ideas and suggestions. When she returned home in the evening, Amara found more and more empty rooms. Rodrigo warned her by phone that he had important meetings, business trips, business dinners. She learned to fall asleep alone in their huge bedroom, where every detail reminded her of the happy days of their marriage. One day, while going through the mail, she found a bill from an expensive jewelry store. The purchase had been made on her husband's credit card, a dainty diamond necklace. Rodrigo never gave her jewelry, considering it a waste of money. Amara tucked the bill away in her desk drawer, hesitant to ask the question directly. She sat in her office at the restaurant for a long time that evening, trying to concentrate on her work. Tiago had stopped by to check on the progress of the wine list for the new establishment and immediately noticed her condition. "Is something wrong?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. Amara shook her head, trying to smile. "Just tired. Too much on my plate." Tiago looked at her carefully, but didn't question her. Instead, he suggested, "Let's go to the winery tomorrow. We have a supplier to choose from, and a change of scenery would do us good." She agreed, grateful for the opportunity for distraction. At home, the emptiness and silence awaited her again, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock in the living room. Rodrigo had sent word that he would be late for a meeting. Amara no longer believed these explanations, but she continued to pretend that everything was fine. Sunday morning was unusually sweltering. Amara woke up early and went down to the kitchen where the housekeeper was preparing breakfast. Rodrigo was still asleep after another late homecoming. He had hardly spoken to her the last few weeks, immersed in endless phone calls and business correspondence. The sound of the coffee machine broke the morning silence. Amara took a cup and stepped out onto the terrace, savoring the rare moments of peace. Her gaze slid absent-mindedly over the garden, where the gardener was already trimming the hedges. Suddenly she heard her husband's voice coming from the upper balcony. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper, but in the morning silence every word was clearly audible. "Honey, I miss you." "Yeah, I can get away tonight." "No, she's busy with her new restaurant, won't even notice." The cup in Amara's hands trembled, a few drops of coffee falling onto the light marble floor. She froze, afraid to move. "Of course I remember about your birthday. Yes, the necklace suits you. I knew you'd like it. You are the most beautiful." Amara silently walked back into the house. Only one thought was pounding in her head, that very necklace from the jewelry store. She went up to her dressing room, mechanically going through dresses, trying to pick something for a business meeting. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to breathe deeply and keep her composure. An hour later, she was already behind the wheel of her car, heading toward her friend's boutique. Raquel met her at the entrance, immediately noticing the uneasy expression on Amara's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, ushering her friend into her office and closing the door tightly. Amara sank into a chair, feeling the last of her strength leaving her. "He's cheating on me, Raquel. I heard him talking this morning." Raquel silently poured water from the decanter and handed the glass to her friend. "Tell me everything in order." Amara spoke at length, remembering all the oddities in her husband's behavior over the past months: the late returns, the smell of other people's perfume, the occasional traces of lipstick, the constant business trips. It was all coming together now into a coherent picture of betrayal. "Don't jump to conclusions." Raquel crouched down beside her, taking her friend's hand. "We need to think it over carefully. Maybe there's some explanation." What explanation could there be for a 50,000 reals necklace? Amara grinned bitterly. "A necklace he gave to another woman?" Raquel shook her head thoughtfully. "Look, you're emotional right now. Don't make any sudden moves. Observe him. Gather more information. You have so many important things going on right now with the new restaurant. Don't let this ruin everything you're building." The day stretched on endlessly. Amara arrived at the construction site where workers were finishing the walls of the future restaurant. Tiago was there, discussing some details with the foreman. When he saw her, he immediately realized something was wrong. "Are you not feeling well?" he asked, pulling her away from the noise of the working machinery. "I'm fine," Amara lied, trying to focus on the blueprints. "Let's see the layout plan for the equipment." In the evening, she returned to the empty house. There was a message on the answering machine from Rodrigo. He was late for work again. Amara went up to his office, daring to break the unspoken rule about personal space for the first time in their marriage. She methodically went through his desk drawers and file folders, but found nothing suspicious. Rodrigo was too cautious. In the bedroom, she turned her attention to his cell phone, forgotten on the bedside table. The screen suddenly lit up. A message had arrived. Amara only had time to see the sender's name, Jacinta, before the phone went off again. The name didn't tell her anything. She couldn't sleep at night, listening to the sounds of cars pulling up. Rodrigo had returned past midnight, smelling of expensive perfume. She recognized the scent now. It had appeared on his clothes several times before. At breakfast in the morning, he was his usual self, absent-mindedly going through his email on his phone, occasionally answering her questions in short sentences. Amara watched him, trying to find any hint of remorse in his face, but saw only the usual mask of a businessman. At the restaurant, she immersed herself in her work, trying to occupy every minute with business. Chef Manuel noticed her condition, and for the first time in a long time did not argue when she suggested changes to the menu. In the evening, Raquel called, "How are you?" "I don't know," Amara answered honestly. "I feel like I'm living in some kind of bad dream, trying to figure out when he started lying to me, how long it's been going on." "Look," her friend's voice became serious. "I've been making inquiries. This Jacinta is a model, often appears at social events. They say she recently bought an apartment downtown, an expensive apartment, and she's been seen in your husband's company." Amara felt the fingers clutching the phone go numb. "How do you know all this?" "I have my own sources in the modeling business. Be careful. Women like that are dangerous. They know what they want and they go after it any way they can." After her conversation with Raquel, Amara sat in her office for a long time, looking at the family photo on her desk. She and Rodrigo were smiling at the camera, happy, in love. The photo had been taken 3 years ago, on their wedding anniversary. A phone call snapped her out of her musings. It was Tiago. He was worried about why she hadn't shown up for an important meeting with the suppliers. Amara realized with horror that she had completely forgotten about it. "I've taken care of everything," he reassured her. "But you're bothering me. Maybe you need some help?" She was almost ready to tell him the truth, but held back at the last moment. "Thanks. Just a little family problem. It'll pass." The construction work on the new restaurant was nearing completion. Amara spent more and more time there, trying to control every little detail. It helped her not to think about what was going on at home, where every evening turned into a silent spectacle with dinner for two and polite phrases about the weather. That day, she arrived earlier than usual. Workers were finishing installing the light fixtures, their tools and stepladders scattered throughout the room. Amara cautiously made her way between them, making notes in her notebook about the necessary refinements. A massive metal stepladder stood against the wall where the wine cabinet was planned to be placed. As she walked by, Amara snagged the edge with her purse. The stepladder staggered and began to fall. It all happened in a split second. Amara tried to bounce away, but the heavy structure caught up with her, hitting her leg painfully. A sharp pain pierced her shin. Amara cried out, drawing the attention of the workers. The first to run up to her was the foreman. "Senora Moraes, are you all right?" She tried to get up, but her leg wouldn't budge. Through the torn fabric of her pants, she could see a deep wound with blood oozing from it. At that moment, Tiago entered the room. Seeing what was happening, he instantly assessed the situation. "We need to get to the hospital right away. I'll drive." Amara wanted to object that she could call a cab, but Thiago was already lifting her in his arms, careful not to hurt her leg. He smelled of fresh cologne and coffee. Amara felt awkward at this closeness, but the pain was stronger than the embarrassment. They were admitted quickly to the hospital emergency room. The wound looked serious. The young doctor examined the injury and shook his head. It needs stitches. Lucky it didn't hit the tendon. Tiago remained waiting in the hallway while the doctor treated the wound. Amara tried not to wrinkle her nose in pain as the needle passed through her skin. The thought of calling Rodrigo crossed her mind, but she pushed it away. Her husband wouldn't answer anyway, referring to an important meeting. An hour later, everything was finished. The doctor wrote prescriptions for painkillers and antibiotics and gave advice on how to care for the stitches. Tiago listened attentively, memorizing every word. By the time they left the hospital, it was beginning to get dark. "I'm taking you home," Tiago said in a tone that tolerated no objection. "You won't be able to drive in this condition." Amara nodded, feeling the effects of the anesthetic. In the car, she covered her eyes, trying to relax. Tiago drove carefully, trying to avoid any bumps in the road. When they reached the house, he helped her out of the car and insisted on walking her to the door. Amara struggled up the steps, leaning on his arm. The front door was unlocked, which meant Rodrigo was home. There were strange sounds coming from the bedroom on the second floor. Amara froze, her heart skipping a beat. Tiago heard it too and looked at her questioningly. At that moment, a woman's laughter sounded, followed by Rodrigo's low voice. Without thinking about her sore leg, Amara started up the stairs. Tiago followed her, ready to support her if she stumbled. The bedroom door was ajar, a strip of light falling on the dark parquet of the hallway. What she saw upon entering the room changed her life forever. On their marital bed lay a young woman with luxuriant dark hair. Around her neck glittered the very same diamond necklace. Rodrigo, dressed only in pants, sat beside her, stroking her shoulder. "What an unexpected meeting!" Amara's voice sounded unnaturally calm. Rodrigo jumped up, his face pale. "Amara, you were supposed to be at the restaurant." The woman on the bed didn't even try to cover herself, only looking curiously at the entrance. A slight smile played on her lips. "So this is your wife?" I imagined her a little younger. Tiago took a step forward as if wanting to protect Amara from those words. Rodrigo noticed his presence and his face contorted with rage. "And who are you? Now I see why she's always missing work." "Don't you dare!" Amara raised her voice. "Don't you dare turn this upside down. You're the one who brought a mistress into our house, into our bedroom." Rodrigo grabbed his shirt, trying to get dressed. "Let's talk calmly. I'll explain everything." "Explain?" Amara could feel her voice trembling. "What exactly will you explain? How long has this been going on? How much money you've spent on it? Or maybe you'll explain why you chose to meet at our house." The woman, obviously the same Jacinta, stretched lazily and began to dress. "Rodrigo, honey, don't let your wife be dramatic. We're all adults after all." Amara felt her face go numb with anger. "Get out of my house, both of you." "It's my house too," Rodrigo snapped back. "You can't kick me out." "I can, and I will. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Jacinta laughed. Oh, how trivial, an abandoned wife threatening divorce. Tiago, who had been silent until then, suddenly said very calmly and firmly, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've called a cab. It will be here in 5 minutes. I suggest you use it." Rodrigo gave him a hateful look, but did not argue. Jacinta slipped her dress on carelessly, not forgetting to show off her flawless figure. "Let's go, darling. It's gotten too stuffy in here." They walked out, leaving behind the smell of expensive perfume and a ruined life. Amara slowly sank to the edge of the bed, not caring that just a moment ago her husband's mistress lay here. "I'll take you to the hotel," Tiago said quietly. You can't stay here tonight. Amara nodded, mechanically gathering the necessary items into a small bag. The stitches in her leg were beginning to ache. The anesthetic was wearing off. But this pain seemed insignificant compared to what was going on in her soul. The room at the Palace Hotel was sterile and impersonal. Tiago had insisted on a five-star hotel, though she was willing to go anywhere as long as it was away from home. The stitches in her leg throbbed with a dull ache, but this physical pain seemed almost pleasant. It distracted her from thoughts of what had happened. "I'll order room service dinner," Tiago said, standing in the doorway. "You need to eat and take your medication." Amara shook her head. "No need. I just want to be alone." He paused, clearly not wanting to leave her like this, but then nodded. "Okay. But I'll leave my phone number on the nightstand. Call me anytime." Left alone, Amara slowly made her way to the bathroom. From the mirror, a pale woman with faded eyes looked back at her. She mechanically washed her face, removed her makeup, brushed her hair, familiar actions that now seemed pointless. The phone on the bedside table vibrated insistently. Rodrigo was trying to call. Amara turned it off, not wanting to hear another excuse. She knew her husband. Now he would apologize, promise to make things right, say it was a mistake. And then he would go back to his young mistress. There was a cautious knock at the door. It was the waiter with a tray. Tiago had ordered dinner after all. Light soup, fresh bread, herbal tea. Amara tried to swallow a few spoonfuls, but the food seemed tasteless. Only now she noticed that she had forgotten her favorite earrings. They were left on the dressing table in the bedroom, the same bedroom where the night stretched on endlessly. Amara lay in the unusually hard bed staring up at the ceiling. The image of Jacinta on their bed, the glint of the necklace around her neck, Rodrigo's confused face. Where had she made a mistake? Had she gotten too caught up in her work, or grown old, or simply bored her husband? A message from Raquel arrived in the morning. News traveled fast in their town. A friend had offered to come over, but Amara had declined. She wasn't ready to discuss what had happened, wasn't ready for sympathetic glances and consolations. The day passed like a blur. Amara canceled all her appointments, citing her poor health. She tried to read the magazine left in the room, watch TV, but she couldn't perceive anything. Her thoughts kept coming back to the last few months of their marriage. Now she saw all the signs she had ignored before. In the evening, Tiago showed up again. He brought fresh fruit and new painkillers. The previous ones were running out. "How's your leg?" he asked, taking a seat in a chair by the window. "It hurts," Amara shrugged. "But it doesn't matter. It is important. You need to watch your health, especially now." His calm, confident voice had an oddly soothing effect. Tiago didn't try to give advice or comfort. He was just there, ready to help if needed. The next day, a bouquet arrived from Rodrigo, a huge basket of white roses with a note full of apologies. Amara told him to take the flowers to the hotel lobby. An hour later, a second basket appeared, then a third. By evening, the room resembled a flower store. She asked the staff not to accept any more deliveries in her name. Raquel did arrive, despite the ban. She brought Amara's favorite chocolates and fresh clothes from the boutique. "You can't hide here forever," she said as she arranged the items in her closet. "You've got to start taking action." "I'll file for divorce," Amara replied quietly. "But right now, I just can't." Raquel took a seat next to her on the bed. "You know what the nasty thing is? That Jacinta has already managed to brag about her victory on social media. In hints, of course, but it's understandable." Amara felt the tears she had been holding back all day finally break through. She cried for a long time, shaking her whole body as her friend stroked her back and whispered something comforting. In the evening, Tiago came again. He brought documents that needed a signature. Work on the new restaurant couldn't stop because of her personal problems. Seeing her tear-stained face, he frowned. Maybe we should take a break from the project. No, Amara shook her head firmly. Work is the only thing I have left. You have so much more left, he objected softly. Your restaurant, your friends, your power, but right now you need to recover. On the fourth day of her stay at the hotel, Amara finally decided to turn on her phone. Dozens of missed calls from Rodrigo, messages apologizing, promising to make things right. One message in particular hurt her. You weren't the perfect wife either. Remember how much time you spent at work. Tiago appeared just as she began to cry again. He silently sat down next to her, holding out a handkerchief. You know what the most frustrating part is? Amara wiped away her tears. He blames me, says I've been working too hard, and now I'm thinking maybe he's right. No, Tiago said firmly. It's manipulation. He's looking for excuses for his weakness. You are a talented woman who has built a successful business. That's no reason to cheat. His words seemed to give her strength. Amara stood up, walked to the window. The city life below was bustling with people going about their business, unaware of the dramas playing out in their hotel rooms. You're right, she said finally. We need to get back to work. I can't let him ruin everything I've built. Tiago smiled. Now that's more like the woman I know. We have an important meeting with the equipment suppliers tomorrow. Can I count on you? Yes, Amara squared her shoulders. I'll be back in action tomorrow. The first morning back at the restaurant began unusually early for Amara. She had carefully selected her outfit in the hotel room, realizing that the curious eyes of the staff would be upon her today. A strict black dress, pearl earrings, and flawless makeup were her armor for the day ahead. The stitches on her legs still ached, but Amara forced herself to put on her heeled shoes. No one must see her weakness. In the cab, she went over the reports for the days she'd been away. Work didn't stop for a minute. At the entrance to the Esperanza, she was met by the maitre d', Paulo, his face expressing genuine joy. Senora Morais, it's so good to have you back. Amara forced herself to smile. Thank you, Paulo. What's the news? It's all going well. Yesterday was a full house. We even had to turn away some guests without prior reservations. In her office, the first thing she did was look over the accounting documents. The numbers were reassuring. No matter what was going on in her personal life, the restaurant was thriving. Chef Manuel stopped by with new ideas for the menu, and for the first time in a long time, they had a constructive discussion without argument. Around noon, there was a stirring in the room. Amara looked out of the study and froze. Rodrigo and Jacinta were sitting at a table by the window. Her husband was dressed in his favorite gray suit, and his companion was resplendent in a tight red dress. She still wore the same diamond necklace around her neck. Paulo approached Amara, a look of concern in his eyes. Do you want me to refuse them service? No, she replied firmly. We will serve them as normal guests. Just bring me an account of exactly what they ordered. Amara returned to her office, but no more work was going on. She could hear Jacinta's laughter coming from the hall, unnaturally loud, attracting the attention of the other visitors. Rodrigo said something to her in a low voice, occasionally glancing toward his wife's office. Half an hour later, Paulo knocked on the door. They ordered seafood soup, avocado salad, and steak. Glasses of champagne for both of them. Thank you. Make sure everything is perfect. Amara forced herself to focus on the paperwork, but suddenly there was a piercing female scream in the hall. She ran out of the office. Jacinta was standing there, pointing a finger at her soup plate. Cockroach! There's a cockroach in my soup! Patrons at neighboring tables turned around in horror. Rodrigo was looking at the contents of his plate with exaggerated indignation. Amara quickly approached their table, keeping her outward composure. What's the matter? She asked icily. Jacinta flashed her hands in a martial manner. "This is outrageous. Your supposedly elite restaurant is serving cockroach soup." Amara looked at the plate carefully. A small, dark body was indeed floating in the soup, but something about this picture was wrong. In her years in the restaurant business, she had learned to notice details. "Paolo, call the health inspector," Amara said calmly, "and have our security guard check the CCTV footage from the last 30 minutes. Jacinta turned slightly pale but continued to be indignant. "You dare to check anything? This is unheard of. Rodrigo, honey, we have to report this to the sanitation department." Rodrigo looked less confident. "Amara, let's solve this peacefully. Why complicate things?" "Peacefully?" Amara allowed herself a slight smile. "Sure. Let's wait for the inspector and look at the records. I'm sure that will clear things up." Jacinta began to gather her purse. "This is insulting. We're leaving immediately." "I'm afraid we'll have to stay a while." Amara's voice became harsher. "Perjury is a serious charge, and if it turns out that the cockroach was planted intentionally—" Rodrigo stood up, trying to get the situation under control. "Look, you're just getting back at us. It's unprofessional." "Unprofessional." Amara raised her voice and there was silence in the room. "Unprofessional is bringing your mistress to your ex-wife's restaurant. Unprofessional is putting on a cheap show with a planted cockroach. And I run a business, and reputation is not an empty word to me." The maitre d' returned with a security guard who held up a tablet with surveillance footage. The screen clearly showed Jacinta throwing something onto her plate after making sure no one was looking at her. "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" The health inspector appeared and asked. Jacinta grabbed her purse and ran out of the hall. Rodrigo hurried after her, throwing Amara a scathing glare. "You're going to regret this." When they were gone, Amara turned to the visitors. "I apologize for this unpleasant incident. Each table will be offered dessert on the house." Back in her office, she finally allowed herself to shiver. The phone on the desk vibrated a message from Rodrigo. "This is war. You started it." Tiago arrived in the evening. He already knew what had happened. "Do you realize they won't stop?" he asked, looking at Amara with concern. "I understand." She sank tiredly into her chair. "But I won't let them destroy what I've spent so many years building. We need to be ready for inspections. They'll probably try to use their connections." Amara nodded. "I know. Rodrigo has already threatened me." Tiago looked out the window thoughtfully. "I have connections too. If need be, we can defend ourselves." At that moment, Paolo ran into the office. "Senora Morais, the health inspectorate just called. There will be an unscheduled inspection tomorrow morning." Amara glanced over to Tiago. They both realized that this was just the beginning. The sanitary inspection started at exactly 9 in the morning. 3 inspectors in white coats methodically walked around the kitchen, looking in every corner, checking the temperature of the refrigerators, examining the food labeling. Amara followed them, answering questions and providing the necessary paperwork. Chef Manuel was nervous, his hands shaking as he opened the food containers. Despite their previous disagreements, he was trying to help now. Professional pride would not allow his kitchen to be deemed unfit. "Fish storage temperature is half a degree above normal," the inspector noted dryly, making a note in her clipboard. "We just received a fresh shipment," Amara explained. "The refrigerator hasn't had time to reach full capacity yet." The inspector pressed her lips together. A violation is a violation. By noon, the list of observations took up several pages. Most of them were minor: an incorrectly filled out cleaning log, a missing label on one of the bins, a microscopic crack in the tile. But Amara realized every observation would be used against her. In the middle of the inspection, Tiago walked into the restaurant. Seeing what was going on, he frowned. "They've been here for 3 hours?" Amara nodded. And it doesn't look like they're going to leave. Usually, the inspections don't take more than an hour. I'll make some calls. Tiago stepped aside, pulling out his phone. 15 minutes later, the new inspector appeared, a personable, middle-aged man. He scrutinized his colleague's documents and suddenly began to challenge some of the observations. The storage temperature is within the margin of error. The logbook is filled out according to the old form, but it's not critical. A crack in the tile. Are you serious? The first inspectors looked displeased, but they didn't dare to argue. The inspection ended with minimal remarks and an order to fix them within a week, but that was just the beginning. The next day, the fire inspectorate showed up. Then, the labor inspection. The taxman demanded an unscheduled audit of records for the last 3 years. Amara practically lived in the restaurant, sorting through endless paperwork and receiving inspectors. She continued to spend the night in the hotel. The thought of returning home caused a panic attack. In the evening, after the next commission had left, she sat in her office trying to organize the documents. Raquel knocked on the door. "I brought you a proper dinner. You can't just eat coffee." Amara smiled gratefully at her friend. "Thank you. Do you want to sit down?" Raquel settled into the chair, looking at her friend carefully. "How are you holding up?" "Fine." Amara shrugged her shoulders. "There's a lot of work to do. I know Rodrigo is behind it. He's got good connections in the city government." Amara set the paperwork aside. "He wants to force me to sell the restaurant, or close it down. Thinks I'll be weaker without the business and agree to his divorce terms." "And his terms?" "He's offering me 1/3 of the value of the restaurant and the house. Says it's a generous offer considering my infidelity." Raquel snorted indignantly. "Your infidelity? Has he lost his mind?" "He's convinced I'm having an affair with Tiago, and nothing can change his mind." At that moment, Tiago himself entered the office. Seeing Raquel, he apologized and wanted to leave, but Amara stopped him. "Stay. We need to discuss the situation." Tiago sat down on the edge of the table. "I talked to the lawyers. They think all these inspections are a clear abuse of power. We can file a complaint." "And a long trial will begin," Amara said tiredly. "In the meantime, the inspections will continue. They'll find something. You can always find something if you really want to. Then we need to proceed by other means." Tiago looked determined. "I have information about your husband's business. Not all of his dealings are crystal clear." Amara shook her head. "I don't want to stoop to his level." "This isn't about revenge," Tiago objected softly. "This is about self-defense. If he realizes you can respond, he'll stop." Raquel backed him up. "He's right, Amara. You can't always play by the rules with someone who doesn't follow the rules." At that moment, Paulo literally flew into the office. "Mrs. Moraes, there's an article on the internet about our restaurant. It says terrible things." Amara opened the news site. The article had loud headlines: "Unsanitary in a high-end restaurant," "Cockroaches in the plates," "Famous restaurateur hides violations." The article was accompanied by photos, obviously staged, but looking convincing enough for the unsophisticated reader. "That's not all." Paulo rubbed his napkin nervously. "Already 3 guests have canceled their reservations for next week." Amara felt her fingers go numb. She had spent so many years building the restaurant's reputation, and now it could all come crashing down because of a false article. Tiago stood up resolutely. "I'm calling my PR manager. We need to prepare a retraction right away. Do you have the camera footage of that cockroach incident?" Amara nodded. "I do, and staff testimony." "Good. Then we'll fight it out. I won't let them destroy your business." Raquel also joined the discussion. "I know a journalist. He can write a truthful article about how competitors are trying to smear a successful restaurant." Amara looked at these people, ready to help her in her fight, and felt her strength returning to her. Yes, Rodrigo had declared war on her, but she was not alone in this battle. "All right," she said, straightening up. "Let's make a plan of action. We need to protect the restaurant's reputation at all costs." The morning meeting with the lawyers dragged on for 3 hours. Amara sat at the head of the table in the restaurant's conference room, listening intently to the lawyers' recommendations. Tiago positioned himself to her right, making notes in a notepad. "We can counter-sue for defamation," the lead lawyer, a gray-haired man with an impressive briefcase, was saying. "We have surveillance footage, witness statements. The internet article did serious damage to the establishment's reputation." Amara looked at the printouts of reservations lying in front of her. The number of cancellations was growing daily. Regular customers who had been coming to the restaurant for years were now canceling tables. "It's going to take time to prepare a lawsuit," Tiago set his pen aside. "And we need to act quickly. Every day of downtime takes a toll." At that moment, Paolo entered the room with a tray of fresh coffee. His usually immaculate uniform was slightly wrinkled. The last few days had been hard on the entire staff. "Senora Moraes," he leaned toward Amara. "The IRS called. They want to re-inspect the cash registers." Amara pinched the bridge of her nose with her fingers. Her head was splitting from the endless stream of problems. Tiago, noticing her condition, adjourned the meeting. When everyone left, he remained seated next to her. "You need to rest. You've been working non-stop for a week now." "No time to rest." Amara tried to smile, but the smile came out fake. "Rodrigo knows what he's doing. He wants to wear me down with tests, make me give in." Tiago looked at her carefully. "Why didn't you, from the beginning, tell me about the problems in your marriage?" Amara turned away to the window. "I didn't want to mix personal and business. You're my business partner, not a friend?" he finished softly for her. "But I consider you a friend, Amara, and it pains me to see you tried to be destroyed." She noticed for the first time that he called her by her first name, without the formal Senora Moraes. It made her feel warmer for some reason. After lunch, a crew from the local TV station arrived. Raquel had arranged an interview. The journalist, a young woman with intelligent eyes, asked the right questions about the history of the restaurant, about quality standards, about the dedication of the staff. Amara spoke confidently, not showing how hard it was for her to keep her face in front of the camera. Tiago stood behind the camera, supporting her with his gaze. When the reporter asked about the recent accusations, he nodded faintly, and Amara found the strength to answer calmly and dignified. "Our restaurant has always been known for the quality of its food and service. We are open to any inspections and are ready to prove our reputation." In the evening, when the camera crew left, Amara finally allowed herself to relax. She sat in the half-empty restaurant hall. There had been noticeably fewer customers in recent days. "You know what the most frustrating thing is?" she said to Tiago, who approached. "I really loved him. I believed we were building something real." Tiago took a seat next to her. "Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have, but it's their loss, not yours. And now he's trying to take away the last thing I have, my life's work." "We won't let him," Tiago said firmly. "I have a plan." He pulled a file folder from his briefcase. "Remember what I said about your husband's not-so-clean dealings? My people found something interesting in his construction business." Amara opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of documents, account statements, contracts with contractors. With each page she read, her eyebrows rose higher and higher. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter," Tiago shrugged. "What matters is that we now have leverage." "But to use such methods—" Amara hesitated. "Listen," Tiago took her hand. "Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. He started this war first." His touch was warm and confident. Amara suddenly caught herself thinking that she felt secure for the first time in a long time. At that moment, an excited Paolo ran into the hall. "Senora Morais, the sanitary police have arrived. They want to seal the kitchen." Tiago instantly jumped up. "I'll take care of it. I have an acquaintance in their department." He pulled out his cell phone and quickly dialed a number, stepping aside. Amara watched him, feeling a strange mix of emotions: gratitude for his support, anxiety for the future of the restaurant, and something else she was afraid to define. Half an hour later, the situation was settled. The sanitation police had left, satisfied with the ID check. Tiago returned to the table where Amara sat. It was just a show of force. They wanted to show they could come at any time. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You're stronger than you think," he smiled. "It's just that sometimes you need a friend's help." Late that night, back in the hotel room, Amara stood at the window for a long time. The lights of the city twinkled below, but she didn't notice them, immersed in her thoughts. The events of the last few weeks had turned her life upside down. The betrayal of her husband, the threat of losing her business, the constant pressure. And in the midst of all this chaos, there was a man willing to support her for nothing, without asking for anything in return. Her phone vibrated with a message from Tiago. "I'll meet with the press tomorrow at 10. I'll prepare all the paperwork. Together we'll manage." Amara smiled, feeling the familiar anxiety recede. Yes, they would pull it off. She had no doubt of that now. The day began with an unpleasant surprise. Another fire safety inspection. This time the inspectors picked on every little detail: the distance between the tables, the width of the aisles, the condition of the electrical wiring. Amara patiently followed them, writing down all the remarks in a notebook. "This outlet doesn't meet the new requirements." The fire inspector tapped a pencil on the wall. "We need to completely change the wiring in this section." "But we only did an audit 3 months ago," Amara objected. "I have all the certificates." The inspector shrugged indifferently. "The requirements changed last week. All catering establishments must now meet the new standards." His eyes read understanding of the situation. He had clearly been instructed from above to find any violations. Amara saw this, but couldn't do anything about it. Chef Manuel was smoking nervously at the back door, watching the scene. When the inspectors reached the kitchen, he stood next to Amara, ready to defend his turf. "All equipment is certified. The ventilation system undergoes regular maintenance." However, the inspector made another note: "The exhaust system needs upgrading. And those gas stoves." Amara could feel the despair growing inside. Replacing the equipment would cost a huge amount of money that simply wasn't available right now. The number of visitors continued to drop after the scandalous article. After the firemen left, Paolo knocked on Amara's office. He looked worried. "Senora Morais, the staff is worried. There are rumors that the restaurant may close." Amara rubbed her temples tiredly. "Gather everyone in the banquet hall. I need to talk to the staff." 15 minutes later, the entire staff was gathered in the hall. Waiters, cooks, cleaners, security guards. All of them had worked here for years. The restaurant had become a second home to them. Amara looked at their worried faces. "I know times are tough. We're under pressure from inspections, trying to tarnish the reputation of the place. But I promise you we'll get through this. I will not allow the restaurant to close." "We're with you, Mrs. Morais," came the voice of a young waitress named Maria. "We know that all these accusations are lies." The others supported her with cheers of approval. Manuel stepped forward. "I've worked here for 10 years. Yes, we've often argued about the menu," he smiled slightly. "But I know. You've always put quality over profit. We won't let you ruin what we've built together." Amara felt tears come to her eyes. The support of the team meant more to her than all the inspections and threats. After the meeting, Tiago arrived. He brought news. The tax office had started an audit of all the restaurant suppliers. "They're trying to strangle us economically," he said, spreading out documents on the table. "Some suppliers have already called, saying they're forced to suspend cooperation." Amara slumped in her chair. How does Rodrigo manage to coordinate all these inspections? He has connections in the city administration, and money is a universal language. Tiago perched on the edge of the table. "But we have trump cards, too." He pulled out a fresh newspaper. On the front page was an article about Esperanza's restaurant. The reporter detailed the history of the establishment, its sterling reputation, and the strange circumstances of the sudden inspections. "Public opinion is starting to change," Thiago said. "People are seeing that there is a bullying of successful businesses going on." At that moment, Raquel literally flew into the office. "Do you know yet? Jacinta gave an interview to a glossy magazine. She talks about what a terrible atmosphere your restaurant has, how you mistreat your staff." Amara took the outstretched magazine. On the glossy pages, Jacinta posed in gorgeous outfits telling her story. She envisioned herself as a victim of bullying by a jealous wife who couldn't accept her husband's departure. "This is crossing all limits," Tiago pounded his fist on the table. "Now they're trying to smear you personally." "Let him say what he wants," Amara replied tiredly. "I'm more concerned about the inspections. If we have to change equipment, we'll go broke." Raquel shook her head firmly. "No, that won't do. We have to fight back. I have dirt on this Jacinta. She was involved in a scandal a few years ago involving fake advertising contracts." "No," Amara said firmly. "We won't stoop to their level. We'll proceed legally." That evening, when the customers dispersed, Amara remained in the empty hall. She looked at the tables that not so long ago had been thronged with guests. Now, half of them were empty. Manuel approached her, carrying a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "Have a drink, Senora. You haven't eaten anything all day." "Thank you, Manuel." She gratefully accepted the cup. "And thank you for your support today." The chef took a seat next to her. "You know, when I first came to work here, I was a cocky brute. I thought I knew everything better than everyone else. But you taught me the most important thing, respect for what you do. And you taught me to stand my ground," Amara smiled. "Remember our first arguments about the menu?" They sat for a while in friendly silence. Then Manuel stood up. "We'll work something out with this equipment. Maybe we can negotiate an installment plan with the suppliers." "If they'll even agree to work with us," Amara sighed. After the chef left, she sat in the semi-darkened room for a long time, going over all the years she had given to the restaurant in her mind. Every table, every element of the interior had been chosen with love, and now it could all be gone because of her ex-husband's revenge. A rainy Monday morning brought new problems. Amara arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual and found a television group at the entrance, this time not friendly but from the scandalous show City Secrets. The reporters were trying to take comments from the incoming employees. Paulo met her at the service entrance. "They've been here for an hour, pestering everyone with questions about health code violations." Amara took off her wet raincoat, trying to remain calm. "No comment to anyone. Have security make sure they don't get inside." A fresh report from accounting was waiting for her in her office. The numbers were disappointing. Revenues were down 60% from last month. If this continued, in a couple weeks there wouldn't be enough money for staff salaries. The phone rang insistently. Calls from suppliers refusing to work with the restaurant, interspersed with calls from journalists eager for a scoop. Amara methodically answered each one, feeling the tension rising inside. By lunchtime, the inspector from the sanitary service arrived, another unscheduled inspection. This time, he picked on the temperature of the dishwashing water. 2 degrees below the norm. You'll have to write a fine. "But the water heater is running at maximum," Amara tried to explain. The city is having hot water problems because of the heating line repairs. That's your problem. The inspector indifferently filled out the report. The law is the law. After he left, Manuel entered the office. Senora Moraes, we are running out of food. The suppliers require 100% prepayment or they refuse to deliver the goods. Amara opened the safe, pulling out a folder of emergency cash. Here, that's enough for 3 days. We'll figure something out after that. Maybe we should temporarily reduce the menu, the chef suggested cautiously. Keep only the most popular dishes. She shook her head. No, that would be admitting defeat. We'll continue business as usual. After lunch, Raquel showed up with the news. Rodrigo gave an interview to a business magazine. Tells how hard it was for him to work with a career-crazed woman. Implies that you used his connections to grow your business. Amara stared silently out the window, beyond which an endless rain drizzled. Her ex-husband was methodically destroying not only the business, but the reputation she'd spent years building. And that Jacinta of his, Raquel snorted contemptuously, walking around fashion shows wearing that very necklace, showing off her engagement ring. They're not even hiding. At that moment, Paulo literally flew into the office. Senora Moraes, the tax police. They demand the documents for the last 5 years immediately. Amara felt her fingers go numb. 5 years of documentation. That's thousands of pages of invoices, bills, declarations. And she knew for sure they would find something to pick on because they were searching with purpose. 4 inspectors in strict suits occupied the conference room. They demanded more and more documents, asked tricky questions, made notes in their clipboards. Amara answered calmly, but panic was building inside. Toward evening, Tiago called. I heard about the tax audit. How are you? I'm hanging in there. Her voice sounded muffled. But it seems to be the end. They clearly have instructions to find irregularities. Don't give up. There was alarm in his voice. I'm on my way to you. I have a plan. He emerged an hour later, drenched in rain but determined. Look, we can use those documents about the fraud in Rodrigo's construction business. That would be a worthy response. Amara shook her head. No, I don't want to stoop to his level. This isn't about revenge. Tiago sat down on the edge of the table. This is about justice. He's using administrative resources to destroy your business. We have to show him we can play hardball too. At that moment, Maria, a young waitress, knocked on the cabinet. Mrs. Moraes. I'm sorry, but we have a problem. A group of customers are refusing to pay. They say they found a hair in their salad. I'll talk to them myself. Amara headed into the lounge. There was a group of young men sitting at a table, clearly in an aggressive mood. One of them was filming what was happening on his cell phone. Ah, there's the hostess, he exclaimed loudly. Explain why your restaurant is so unsanitary. Amara immediately realized this was a setup. Too feigned outrage, too obvious a desire to provoke a scandal. Let's look at the camera footage, she suggested calmly. They record every table. The young men glanced around, their confidence shaken slightly. Tiago, stealthily coming up behind them, added, and let's call the police. Let them record the fraud. The company quickly paid and left, muttering something about next time. Amara returned to the office feeling completely devastated. They send provocateurs like that on purpose, Tiago said. They want to piss you off, provoke you into a scandal. Amara sank down in her chair. I'm so tired. Every day new inspections, new provocations. The staff is hanging in there, but I can see they're scared, afraid of losing their jobs. Tiago suddenly knelt down in front of her, took her hands in his. Listen to me. You are a strong woman. You built this business from the ground up. Don't let them break you. His touch was warm and confident. Amara felt her lips treacherously trembling. "I don't know how much more I can take. Money is running out. Suppliers are refusing to work." "Then let me help." His eyes looked serious and warm. "I have resources, connections. Together we can do this." At that moment, Paolo knocked on the door. "Senora Moraes, the fire department is here. They say they have to seal the premises because of safety violations." Tuesday morning began for Amara with a phone call. Tiago was calling from the tax office, where he had gone immediately after yesterday's events with the firemen. "All the paperwork has been handed in." His voice sounded confident. "Now we wait for a reaction." Amara sat in her hotel room looking at her cup of cooled coffee. "Are you sure this is the right decision?" "More than. I've turned over to the IRS all the paperwork on the questionable transactions of your husband's construction company. There's a lot of work to be done there." After threatening to seal the restaurant, Tiago decided to act decisively. He'd spent all night in his office preparing documents, making calls, activating old connections. Now the mechanism was set in motion. By 10 in the morning, an unscheduled tax audit came to the office of Rodrigo's construction company. Amara had heard about it from Raquel, who somehow always kept up to date with all the city news. "There's a whole crew, and they say they have specific instructions on what to look for." Things were no better at the restaurant than they had been yesterday. The fire department did seal off part of the premises, demanding immediate repairs to the ventilation system. Amara had to close half the room, rearranging the tables in the remainder. Manuel tried to keep the team's morale up. "It's okay, Senora Moraes. We'll work under camping conditions. The main thing is that the quality of the food will not suffer." After lunch, Rodrigo unexpectedly arrived at the restaurant. He looked unusually disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. "We need to talk," he tossed, walking past a stunned Paolo. Amara received him in his office, deliberately leaving the door open. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Stop it." Rodrigo drummed his fingers nervously on the desk. "The tax audit, the contracting documents. I know it's your doing." "Mine?" Amara allowed herself a slight smile. "I thought you believed in random coincidences, just like I was supposed to believe in the randomness of all those inspections of my restaurant." Rodrigo stood up abruptly. "That's different. I run a large business, hundreds of employees. You don't realize what you're risking." "I don't?" Amara stood up as well. "Did you realize what you were risking by trying to destroy my life's work? Did you realize when you sicked every inspection agency in the city on me?" At that moment, Tiago entered the office. When Rodrigo saw him, he blurted out, "Oh, so that's who's behind this. Is your new lover playing business wars?" "Don't stoop to insults," Tiago replied calmly. "We're just restoring justice, and unlike you, we're acting completely legally." Rodrigo took a step toward him, clenching his fists, but then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and turned pale. "This isn't over," he said, and ran out of the office. An hour later, Raquel announced the latest news. The office of the construction company had been found to be in serious violation of tax laws. The company's accounts had been frozen. "Now he knows how it feels," Amara said, looking out the window. "When your business is trying to be destroyed." Tiago put a hand on her shoulder. "It was a necessary measure. Sometimes you need a show of force to stop an aggressor." By late afternoon, it was known that a tax audit at Rodrigo's company had uncovered a tax avoidance scheme in the construction of a large shopping center. The claims amounted to millions. A film crew came to the restaurant. This time they were interested not in unsanitary, but in the story of unfair pressure on a successful business. Amara gave a short interview, trying to speak with restraint and professionalism. Late in the afternoon, when the visitors had dispersed and the staff was cleaning, Maria knocked on the door. "Senora Moraes, there's your ex-husband's fiancé." demands a meeting. Jacinta burst into the office without waiting for an invitation. Her usual self-confidence was gone, her makeup smeared. "What are you doing? You're ruining our future." Amara looked at her calmly. "Your future? You mean a future built on destroying other people's lives?" "You're just being vindictive. You can't stand that he chose me." "No, dear," Amara stood up. "I'm protecting my business. What you took as revenge is just fair retribution. By the way, how do you like the necklace? I hope it was worth it." Jacinta burst into tears. "Rodrigo says he could lose the company. All his accounts are frozen." "Tell him," Amara opened the office door, "that I'm ready to negotiate. When he comes to his senses, have him contact my attorney." After Jacinta left, Tiago entered the office. "I heard part of the conversation. You were great." "I feel devastated," Amara admitted. "This whole war thing, it's exhausting." "But we're winning," Tiago smiled. "Rodrigo has backed himself into a corner with his machinations. Now he'll have to make concessions." At that moment, Rodrigo's lawyer called. He reported dryly that his client was willing to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Amara hung up the phone and looked at Tiago. "It seems we really won." "No," he shook his head. "We just got justice done. And you know what? Now we can get back to our plans to develop a new restaurant." Amara smiled genuinely for the first time in a long time. There was still a long road ahead. They had to rebuild their reputation, win back customers, and renovate the premises. But most importantly, the bullying was over. Paolo brought the latest newspapers, the front-page headlines about the tax scandal at Rodrigo's construction company. Not a word about Esperanza's restaurant, not a hint of the previous accusations. "You know," Tiago said as he looked through the papers, "sometimes you have to go through adversity to get stronger. Your restaurant has endured, your team has rallied. Now you can move on." It was decided to hold the negotiations on neutral territory, in the conference room of the prestigious Imperial Hotel. Amara arrived early to prepare herself mentally for the upcoming meeting. Tiago insisted on attending with her. "You shouldn't be alone with him. Rodrigo is cornered right now, and that makes him dangerous." She had chosen a strict black suit for the meeting and minimal jewelry, only pearl earrings, a gift from her father. Her hair was gathered into a flawless bun, and a leather folder contained all the necessary documents. Rodrigo showed up exactly at the appointed time. He looked gaunt with shadows under his eyes. His lawyer, an older man with a keen eye, followed him in. Jacinta was thankfully absent. "Let's get straight to the point," Rodrigo began, wasting no time with greetings. "Your accusations of tax violations are unfounded." Tiago calmly pulled out a folder of documents. "Allow me to disagree. We have evidence of using fictitious contractors, overestimating cost estimates, withdrawing funds through shell companies." Rodrigo's lawyer frowned. "It's just speculation. Such evidence may not hold up in court." "Perhaps," Amara allowed herself a slight smile. "But the investigation itself will take months, if not years. All the while, the company's accounts will be frozen. Are you prepared for those consequences?" Rodrigo drummed his fingers nervously on the table. "What do you want?" "A simple agreement," Amara opened her folder. "You stop pressuring my restaurant. No inspections, no provocations, no press articles. In return, we don't let the investigation into tax violations go forward." "That's it?" Rodrigo looked at his ex-wife incredulously. "No," she pulled out another document. "You will publicly deny all allegations against the restaurant. You will say it was a misunderstanding." The lawyer leaned over to Rodrigo, saying something quietly in his ear. The man jerked his shoulder irritably. "What about the division of property? Divorce?" "That's a separate issue," Tiago interjected. "Right now we're only talking about business." Silence hung in the conference room. You could hear the city traffic outside the window, the hum of the air conditioning system. Rodrigo stared out the window, clearly weighing the pros and cons. "Okay," he finally said. "I agree, but I also have a condition. No information about my relationship with Jacinta in the press." Amara nodded. "I'm not interested in your personal life. Only business." They spent the next hour discussing the details of the agreement. The lawyers carefully calibrated each wording, making sure to leave no loopholes for future conflicts. When all the documents were signed, Rodrigo stood up. "I hope you're satisfied now." "I was just protecting what I built," Amara replied calmly. "Just like you would protect your company." He wanted to reply something, but changed his mind. With a silent nod, he walked out of the conference room with his attorney. Amara remained seated at the table, looking at the signed papers. A strange feeling of devastation and relief at the same time swept over her. "Are you okay?" Tiago asked quietly. "Yes," she looked up at him. "I just can't believe it's over." "It's not over," he smiled. "Now the fun part begins, the revitalization of the restaurant." There was a team waiting for them at the restaurant. Paolo, Manuel, the waiters, the cooks. Everyone gathered in the hall, anxiously awaiting the news. "We won," Amara said simply. "There will be no more inspections or provocations." Cheers of joy filled the room. Manuel was the first to approach her. "Senora Moraes, I have prepared a special meal in honor of this day. May I set the table for the entire team?" The entire staff gathered around the festive table. They were talking about the future, making plans, joking around. Amara looked at these people who had stayed loyal to her in the most difficult times and felt endless gratitude. Raquel brought a bottle of champagne. "To a new beginning." Tiago raised his glass. "And to Amara's strength of character, which helped us overcome all the difficulties." In the evening, when everyone had dispersed, Amara stood at the window of her office. The evening lights were already on in the hall, creating a cozy atmosphere. Several regulars, having heard about the resolution of the conflict, had already made reservations for the weekend. Tiago entered without knocking. He had become so close over the weeks that formalities seemed superfluous. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in the last month." She turned to him. "I lost my husband, but gained true friends. I almost lost my business, but I've gotten stronger." "You didn't lose, you freed yourself," he corrected gently. "And now you can start a new chapter of your life." Amara looked at her watch. "It's getting late. Time to head back to the hotel." "You know," Tiago paused, "maybe it's time to think about a house of our own. I saw a beautiful mansion near the new restaurant." She smiled. "All in good time. Right now, the main thing is to restore the restaurant's reputation and finish the new project." As they were leaving the restaurant, they met Manuel. The chef was writing something down in his notebook. "Senora Marai, I've put together a new seasonal menu. Will you look at it tomorrow?" "I will," she nodded. "And Manuel, thank you for your support." The night city greeted them with a cool breeze and the noise of passing cars. Tiago opened the door of his car. "I'll take you to the hotel." Amara got into the car, feeling strangely calm. There was a lot of work ahead, a lot of problems, a lot of decisions to make. But now, at this minute, she was sure everything would be fine.